Oh. Hi, my name is Ramon Penny, and this presentation is about project stakeholders and communications as it pertains to the Stockwell Street project. A little bit of background information on the actual project itself. It's a new school of architecture, design and construction. There are going to be some other courses involved, but that's usually the main reason. It's located in Stockwell Street, and its contract is with Osborne. Well, based on this, currently it's at the handover stage, in accordance with RIBA, and it's set to be ready in late August, but it'll leave enough time for students to occupy the actual building in September. This presentation will do the following. We'll address the stakeholders in the said project, which is the one in Stockwell Street, outline the stakeholders which are relevant, and at the current stage of the project, which is the handover, because each stage will have more prominent or more relevant stakeholders, but at this handover stage, the ones which will be more important or less important. Then we'll talk about how they're managed, how a project manager or how someone of that authority will deal with it and manage those stakeholders, the benefits towards using those kind of management techniques, and at the end we'll summarize it. Stakeholders. I've getting this quote from an article from Riley. It says, stakeholders is anyone who has vested interest in the activities and decision making of a business. In other words, in any project there's always going to be stakeholders which have a say in regards to the decisions made and how, or even their influence on how they can be changed or altered. And because there's so many stakeholders can be in a project at one time, at one particular part of it, you need to understand which ones you need to have the most priority and the ones which don't. And this leads into explaining why they're important, as like I said in the previous slide, the influence can determine various decisions made by the project. Depending on who they are, they can be the reason why they delay and even stop the works entirely. And stakeholders with higher authority can be the reason why projects get stopped. And they can introduce, some necessarily can't stop things, but necessarily can introduce new ideas. I made a list of stakeholders, it's not necessarily all of them, but it's just a small handful. And this is just to name that there is quite a handful of project stakeholders, and the question is, you need to be able to take this and think of which ones are the most important, and at the handover stage, find just some of these stakeholders which won't be necessary, or won't be relevant. So that's when managing them comes into play. And here are some steps I found in the article. It says the steps are usually involved in identifying them, listing all the project stakeholders, prioritizing them and ranking them from the most to the least important, and understanding their needs in regards to communication. At this handover stage, you need to understand that even though some stakeholders are relevant at this stage, some only require specific types of information or involvement or engagement in the actual project itself. So that's when you need to think about their needs. Do they need to know certain types of information? Because you don't want to get, for example, student lecturers too much involved in the handover stage of a project, because they will think they can influence and make changes at last minute. And that's what I was saying, engaging with them. And once you've done that, you monitor those engagements, you track communication, emails, or any form of, depending on what stakeholder you're referring to, what stakeholder you're communicating with, to determine what kinds and how frequently. Well, here it comes with mapping, and it's understanding the internal and the external stakeholders. The internal are people who are currently committed to the project, usually staff, board members, staff people working inside. External are people who are affected by the project works, aren't exactly directly involved in. Some examples of that are private sector organizations, public sectors, clients, and community partners, And as the previous slide shown, that there was so many other businesses and loads of people who are affected, but they won't have a direct influence on the decision, but they are affected by it. And here again, I've done a small diagram of the internal and the external stakeholders involved. And the external ones are a lot broad, a lot more to it, a lot more, whereas internal is a bit more specific, where this is just to name a few examples, but they're a bit more specific people that can have a direct influence and can actually get more involved in the project. External is similar, in which they can get involved, but at the same time they're not, direct. Most of the time it's not necessarily really direct. When it comes to ranking, they said stakeholders, it comes to listing them in order of priority. And when I mean listing them in priority, I mean the fact that at the rubber stage it'll be the handover stage. So some stakeholders at this point, or in the previous stages, probably would have had more of an influence. But at this handover stage, there'll be ones which have less of an impact or less of engagement. For example, the contractors will probably have more influence than English Heritage at this handover stage. And this diagram is of a matrix, a mapping matrix. It's a visual tool to indicate who the most important stakeholders are. It makes carrying out works in regards to communication and dealing with them and engaging them a lot easier. At the current stage of, like I said, of the project is the handover. You can understand at this stage you could say which stakeholders will be at which part of this diagram, meaning of low to high interest or low to high power. Like someone might have like a high interest in it but have quite a low power, and then it just talks about the decisions you can make in regards to what category they fit into. And like I said, it helps create the understanding for a communication plan. A stakeholder communication plan outlines who you need to communicate with, about what, how you are going to do it, and how often. It's a good thing because it eliminates confusion. You only communicate with the stakeholders that you actually have to do it, and you only have to do it in the ways in which they need to know. It avoids delays. Well, it doesn't mean no delays, but it can help avoid delays and stoppages. It can help deal with chances of increased cost, and if people are well informed and no misunderstandings are caused, then the quality will not be compromised. And in doing so, it can make the project flow and be completed on time for the students to enter in September 2014. Continued, it's an analysis, situation analysis, and it deals with the communication objectives, and I refer to the acronym of SMART, which is specific, which is, it will tell specific tell the stakeholders exactly what they need to know, and measurable, you can keep an eye on it, you can monitor it. It's attainable because there already is a goal, we already have a target of the completion time, and we already have a target of when the students are actually going to arrive. And it's relevant and time-bound. And like I said, time-bound meaning the time, and relevant meaning only the right information is needed to be told. Like students don't really need to know about certain types of information which a contractor will need to know. So only relevant information needs to be expressed to certain stakeholders. And opportunities and challenges are created, but it deals with those. And it addresses key messages and an approach plan. How would you approach this? How would you approach the handover stage? How would you approach it in regards to your stakeholders? The benefits. One of them is understanding. Everyone is aware of what their responsibilities are, what their obligations are, what they're expected to receive. Whether it be they understand that they have to do specific things in regards to what documents to hand in, or how to contact other, people within the actual project itself. Influence. It can improve relationships with people in the organisation. If you don't get stakeholders involved completely, the ones who need to be, then it can make things a bit difficult. If you, for example, give the specific stakeholders what they are actually required, you don't need to overgive what they don't need, then it can create a lot of things easier. And like here, for example, forums of feedback can gain awareness of the interests and opinions of stakeholders. Whereas in the way you communicate can relate to forums and feedback, and stakeholders will know if it's, people who's organising will know if their stakeholders are okay with it, or if there needs to be any improvements or anything that can cause misunderstandings or delays. And it focuses on the most influential stakeholders. You don't want to pick every single stakeholder and try and focus on them, especially at the handover stage when, quite frankly, a large majority of them will be irrelevant. They will be needed. Key relationships can be developed in the long run. Well, in other means, totally off subject. If you were to need, for example, Osborne contractors, need Osborne in the future, if you do have a good relationship with them in one current project, chances are they'll probably be interested in doing it in other projects in the future. At this point, I'm going to talk about the key stakeholders, bearing in mind that it's at the handover stage of the project, meaning I'll only mention the ones which will need the most influence. The lecturers and students are key stakeholders, which, in regards to the lecturer part, they will be involved in the testing of the building services, systems and equipment, identifying and recording any defects and problems which they see when they first see handover of reports and all kinds of building documentation which they need to get, for example, training programs and anything they need to hand back in regards to defects. An inspection upon completion to see if the works are up to standard and to see if any of those said defects are being solved, being rectified. The way in which to communicate with those said stakeholders is, in regards to lecturers, you need to control the flow of information. In other words, restrict the stakeholder from getting all the way down to chain of command and reaching the project design team. They have an influence and a say, but at this handover stage, you wouldn't want them getting all the way to the project design team and asking for changes, because it's at the last, it's borderline completion. So you can do it through contacting a manager who can convey that information to the people who need to actually know, or who need to actually hear. And in regards to the students, it's even more restricted, or information for potential students who want to know about this new building, this new project, will be mostly through the internet, through being updated. There's a lot of, since we're in now the whole social networking thing, there'll probably be more information expressed through Facebook or Twitter about how these things are, how the project's progressing, and literally, in other words, it's just limiting the amount of student engagement with the other stakeholders. They just need to be told what's going on and how it's running. Project sponsors, they're the people that, in other words, the university board, they pretty much do similar things in regards to, because they're funding, they're going to get a lot of information. They need to know about the testing, the maintenance agreements, and the training programs. And also they want to know about the defects. In regards to the testing equipment, they'll be talking to the lecturers and how it's been done. And the maintenance will be the facilities management and the contractors and consultants to know about how they're going to arrange that, how they'll schedule maintenance. In regards to the training program, again, they'll be talking to facilities management, be through meetings and so on and so forth, and identifying and ensuring the defects are rectified or being documents. To communicate, communication with them will be through regular meetings and emails, and because it's at the handover stage, it will become all the more frequent. They'll need to know if defects are being sorted, if training schedules are being agreed, terms are being dealt with, and every party involved is happy. And like I said, a detailed information and documentation to be handed over. Anything official, anything legal needs to be dealt with the university board. Because they're the ones funding it, they need to make sure that their investment is up to standard. Facilities management is they all deal with maintenance agreements, and they'll need to be trained in advance before the school's open so they know how the systems work. And like I said, get used to the systems, services and equipment. Documents related to that will be set schedules, set training plans, and set dates for seminars and places in which they can learn how the systems work and how to maintain them. And they'll need to be monitored and updated on those maintenance arrangements. Does the schedule work? Is it beneficial? Do they need to make changes? That's why the updating part will need to be happening. For example, it's not since it hasn't exactly, it's been tested, but no students have actually used it, so if any problems arise and any adjustments, we need to update. And the communication, like I said, will be through training programs and seminars and meetings, which will hand over specific documents. Those documents, like I said, will be schedules of maintenance to make sure that how things are done. And the seminars and training programs will be mainly for stuff which doesn't come, which isn't planned for. If, for example, a system or piece of equipment does fail, how would you react to it? How would you respond to it? And that will come in the form of seminars and training programs. Neighbours, communication in regards to communicating with neighbours will be in advance. Necessarily just saying, at the handover stage, there probably still might be blocking access or to certain roads or to certain places, and notice will probably be handed in the form of posted, will be email, or be signage saying, for example, this particular road will be blocked off between these certain dates in advance, so no confusion has happened when the project is actually underway, regardless of the stage. And it's the same with regards to the Transport for London, because communication needs to be given to inform them about when they'll be able to access maintenance. To summarise, the stakeholders are very key to the project. They have a lot of influence in the decisions made. You need to make sure you prioritise them because there's so many of them. You need to know which ones are important because it will save time, eliminate misunderstandings when it comes to the communication plan, and it can ensure completion to a high standard because no one's trying to jump in and say they want to change this and change that, because it's easier when they're only told what they need to know. And communication is that all stakeholders are aware of their objectives. They know what's going on, or what they need to know, and the level of communication does vary depending on the stakeholder. But if with the right communication plan put in place, information can be controlled, it can be changed, it can be updated, and at the same time we won't compromise the project as a whole. So the project can go well and things can be done properly.